Hi all, welcome back to the studio. All my videos are unscripted, they're straight off the cuff, and this morning I was thinking about an old friend of mine, Group Captain Peter Townsend. What a wonderful man he was. And I think that a lot of people must have seen the Netflix drama, as it were, The Crown, in which the great romance between Peter Townsend and Princess Margaret is featured. And in fact, I've got here, this is an original Daily Express newspaper from the day which was on November the 1st, 1955, when Princess Margaret has announced that she will not be marrying Group Captain Peter Townsend. And why was that? Well, it was because Peter was divorced, and in those days it was very frowned upon, and of course the Queen was head of the Church of England, and it was a big scene, but it was a massive global scandal really, and a lot of people of course had great sympathy for Peter Townsend and Princess Margaret. But what gets me is that isn't what Peter Townsend should be remembered for. He really was an exceptional individual, and I knew him. I was privileged to know him and know him well. I mean, I've got a whole absolute sheaf of letters from Peter. He often used to write to me, dashing between airports. He was a very busy man. In fact, and this is the great thing, taking aside his Battle of Britain history, a bit like Sailor Milan, and we've got a great video on the channel about Milan, which brings to people's attention the fact that he was a freedom fighter politically and humanitarianly against apartheid in South Africa. And in that respect, Peter was quite similar. So what happened was during the Battle of Britain, well, Peter was a Cromwellian before the war, and was an experienced officer, experienced pilot, experienced airman, flying Hurricanes, and commanding 85 Squadron in the Battle of Britain. And prior to, when he was with 43 Squadron up in Scotland, shot down the first German aircraft to crash on English soil during the Second World War, a Heinkel 111. And typically of Peter, he went to see Carl Mitty, who was the very badly wounded gunner who lost a leg as a result of the action, in hospital. And that's typical of the man. During the Battle of Britain, he survived being shot down. 85 Squadron was heavily engaged, flying from Debden and Croydon. And he really was, well, he was an ace, you know, highly decorated. And that's brilliant. However, when I got in touch with Peter, it was probably about 1988, when I was researching a particular thing, and he was just so helpful. And I don't like the word nice, it's frowned on, but he was a gentleman. And he even used to ring me up at Malvern Police Station where I used to work, and he was living in Belgium then, where he was virtually exiled after the Princess Margaret thing. And when he left the Royal Air Force, because how he got involved with Princess Margaret was he became an equerry to the King. But after leaving the Air Force, he became a journalist, and he covered the Arab-Israeli war on the Golan Heights. And that was the first time that he'd actually seen a dead body. And the actual debris of war on the ground, which, as I think we can all probably imagine, is very different to the war in the air. And of course, Richard Hillary, in The Last Enemy, famously described the war in the air for the fighter pilot particularly as being a clean, like being a duelist, and you're not shooting at the man, you're shooting at the machine. Well, what Peter saw on the Golan Heights, all of that carnage, really shocked him. And that really underpinned a lot of the rest of his life. Of course, he went on to work on the Battle of Britain film as a consultant. I don't even see that, but that's my prized photograph of Peter Townsend and Ginger Lacey, another Battle of Britain 8. whilst they were working on the Battle of Britain film as historical consultants, and Peter signed that to Dilip, best wishes, Peter Townsend. Another thing I got him to sign, actually, back in the 70s, Airfix brought out this 1/24th scale Hurricane, and one of the options was Peter Townsend, which is my model of it here. And I always kept the instruction book because I rather liked it. And in the 80s, I sent it to Peter Townsend, and he's actually signed it, which this must be unique, a unique Airfix Battle of Britain artifact signed by Peter Townsend. So that's quite special. And he was a special man, he really was. And when I met him, he must have been about 72, something like that. And he was recently returned from a humanitarian mission to the South China Sea to save a load of boat people. A marvellous man. And another thing he did, because he was very concerned about the child plight during war, the plight of children and the effect of war on children. And we're seeing this today, aren't we? In the Ukraine, in Gaza, Palestine, you know, terrible how children suffer, the little children, isn't it? Isn't it absolutely dreadful? And he sold his medals, which was DSO, DFC, Queen's Victorian Order, I think he had, which is, or King's Victorian Order it would have been then, which, you know, is for service to the royal household, very exclusive medal. And I think that it must have been 1990. I think he did it for the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, so that it got publicity. And I think even then, the collection went for over £100,000. And he used that money to set up a trust fund for child victims of war. And I think that's just marvellous. You know, I learned so much from Peter as well. And this is interesting. I was just looking at this letter that he wrote to me today. And I featured Peter's story in Letters from the Few, because I used to write about 1,000 letters a year to Battle of Britain pilots. And my archive is all of their replies, which is about their experiences, and we became friends. We you know, were writing about things as friends do. They were always very concerned about my life and my personal life, my children, my work life, you know, and how I managed to fit everything in. I mean, we were friends, and I'm proud to say I was a friend of Peter Townsend. So his chapter is the first chapter in there, which came out, I think, 220, Letters from the Few, pen and sword, still available. And I've quoted from some of these letters, but he says here, he says, I'm not I must make one point clear. In my squadron, 85, we never flew in tight bits of 3 when in action, but only during air drill or displays. Now, isn't that interesting? Because we're kind of brought up on this this narrative that the RAF were flying this tight thick of 3. The idea being that would bring 24 guns instead of the 8 of a single fighter to bear on a German aircraft. Now, that's all very well, and those tactics were decided before the fall of France, before the Second World War, when it was perceived that any attack on Britain would be by German bombers coming from Germany across the North Sea and across our east coast. So what that meant was those bombers would be unescorted by single-engine fighters, by Me-109s, which, as we all know now, were absolutely lethal. So that was all very well, and the idea was that these bombers would ponderously fly along, taking no evasive action, allowing our squadrons in VICs of 3. So you've got 2 flights of 6, which make up the squadron. That's 4 sections. The one section attacks, breaks away, followed by the next section, the next section, and the next section, and they all come round again. Well, of course, in practice, it didn't work like that, did it? Because once Hitler had taken over, conquered France, and he's on the Channel, just 22 miles away, across the Channel in the Pas-de-Calais, that puts even London within range of the Me-109. So the pre-war tactics were just completely inappropriate, but nobody was to anticipate Hitler's phenomenal success in 1940. But anyway, Peter says, well, we didn't fly like that. Only at air displays or air drills, so that's practicing formation flying. He said, as well as occasionally to save time on takeoff. In going into action or on patrol, I put each section of the squadron into line astern. This reduced the squadron's front, increased its mobility, and allowed each pilot more freedom to look about him and behind him. You must remember too that the conditions facing us were quite different to those facing the German fighters. We were on the defence, they were attacking, either as escort or on a sweep. So, and he also goes on to say that we were operating in defence under orders from the ground controller. For this reason, we had to maintain a reasonably compact but not tight formation. Another reason was that apart from the Duxford wing, we were deployed in squadrons of 12 aircraft in 11 group where there was not time enough to join up as wing, with 12 aircraft against perhaps 50, 100 or more of theirs. We had to stick together to launch an effective attack. So, that's really interesting stuff, isn't it? From a squadron commander in the Battle of Britain, from an ace. This is absolutely unique archival material now. And in this letter, he says he's between two aeroplanes somewhere in the world. This was 17th of July, 1989. And he says, blah, blah, blah. He said, in open or line astern, you have three weavers or tail end Charlies who, if they were doing their job properly, have no business to be the first to be shot down. On the contrary, you were covered by three lookouts, except in one tragic case with 85, when a Spitfire joined us, almost certainly piloted by Richard Hillary, who might have known better, with the Spit's front silhouette very similar to the ME-109's. Air tail end Charlie, who saw it, was a fraction of a second too late in warning that the aircraft following were ME-109s. That lost us a super flight commander, Hamilton, from Canada. So, that's just amazing, isn't it? And it's all there. It's all covered in Letters from the Few and in the 8-volume official history for the Battle of Britain Memorial Trust. All of these combats have been forensically deconstructed and written up. So, incredible. Just what a shame Peter himself didn't live to see any of this. But he did write a foreword to my book, Through Peril to the Stars, which came out in 1993. And that isn't an incorrect interpretation of Ferragia ad Astra, by the way. It actually comes from Laurie Whitbread, who was a Spitfire pilot officer on Treble 2 Squadron, shot down and killed 20th of September 1940 at his funeral in Ludlow Cemetery. His grammar school master said, and we turned away and left him through peril to the stars, or something like that. It's quoted in Through Peril to the Stars anyway, but that's where it's from. So, people always go, Ferragia ad Astra, it doesn't mean that. It's nothing to do with that. It was something else. So there we are. Peter Townsend. If you watch The Crown, you'll see, I don't know who the actor is who played him. Didn't get it right. He wasn't. Peter was very sophisticated man, very good looking, strikingly good looking, tall, slim, very posh, but a humanitarian and very kind to me and an absolutely lovely man. Obviously long gone now. I've got a funeral card in here that his widow sent me, Mary Luce. Such a shame they're all gone. Anyway, there we are, Peter Townsend. I'm going to record some more, I think, this morning while I've got all the gear set up. Thanks for joining us in the studio again. And if you enjoy what we do and you're interested in the Battle of Britain, please subscribe. It's all free. It doesn't cost you a penny. Join the community. Any comments, good or bad, positive or negative feedback, any ideas for any future videos or podcasts, please leave them in the comment section below. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.